In the modern imagination, we view ancient Greece as the cradle of romance and philosophy. We gaze upon those white, gleaming marble statues and imagine a civilization of perfect beauty and high morals. But this is merely a facade, a grand illusion. If you were to peel back the layers of time, scraping away the white marble dust to look into the dimly lit bedrooms of Athens or the barracks of Sparta, you would find a darkness that would shake your very soul. The truth is, love in the ancient world was not about consent, choice, or permission. It was a battlefield. It was a force of nature that had to be conquered. To possess someone, men did not offer flowers. They turned to black magic, lethal poisons, and ritualized kidnapping. Archaeological evidence reveals that in those times, the line between falling in love and falling under a curse was terrifyingly thin. The evidence buried beneath the earth tells a different story. A story where power, lust, and absolute control were the only laws. Today, we are turning the pages of history that are stained with blood and pain. We are uncovering secrets that have been silenced for centuries. Prepare yourself, for the reality is far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. To truly understand the terrifying nature of Greek romance, one must look at how they handled rejection. In the shadows of Athens, if a man desired a woman, or a boy, who did not return his affections, he did not write a tearful poem. He turned to the dark arts. Excavations across Greece, particularly in ancient cemeteries and deep wells, have uncovered thousands of katadesmoi, binding cursed tablets. These were not harmless superstitions. They were acts of calculated psychic violence. A desperate lover would take a strip of lead, cold, heavy, and associated with the underworld, and scratch the name of their beloved onto it with a sharp bronze stylus. The language found on these tablets is not romantic. It is brutal and commanding. Bind her, one surviving tablet reads. Bind her hands, her feet, her mind, and her womb. Let her not eat. Let her not sleep. Let her find no joy until she comes to my bed. Once inscribed, these tablets were folded and violently pierced with an iron nail, sealing the victim's fate. They were then buried in the graves of the untimely dead, believing that the angry spirits would carry the message to the underworld gods. But the horror did not end there. Archaeologists have found kolossoi, ancient voodoo dolls made of clay. These figures were found bound in lead shackles, their limbs twisted backward, with needles driven into their eyes and hearts. This was love weaponized. The caster didn't want a partner, they wanted a slave. The goal was to break the victim's free will, to inflict a sacred madness that would leave them no choice but to submit. In the eyes of the ancients, passion was not an emotion, it was a disease, and these rituals were the method of infection. If the dark magic of cursed tablets failed, the desperate turned to chemistry. But in the ancient world, the line between an aphrodisiac and a lethal poison was terrifyingly thin. They sought substances to ignite a fire in the blood, but often, they literally burned their lovers from the inside out. Consider the infamous Spanish fly. This was not a magic potion, it was a biological weapon. These blister beetles contain cantharidin, a highly toxic chemical. When crushed into a fine dust and slipped into a goblet of wine, it causes severe, caustic blistering of the internal organs. The resulting heat, swelling, and blood rush were cynically mistaken for intense sexual arousal. But this passion was a lie. It was the sensation of the body's tissue beginning to necrosis and die. The depravity went even further with hippomanes, a fleshy growth torn from the forehead of a newborn foal. This slimy mass was stolen, dried, and mixed with human hair and fingernail clippings to create a draft believed to induce an uncontrollable, animalistic madness. Imagine the victim at a symposium. They take a sip, expecting romance. Instead, a chemical fever strikes. Sweat pours down their face, sizzling as if the blood itself is boiling. Vision blurs, the room spins, and reality fractures into a nightmare. Ancient medical texts describe victims dying in absolute agony, kidneys destroyed, bleeding internally while physicians stood by helpless. In their obsession to force affection, they were not brewing desire. They were administering a slow, painful death. While the rest of Greece dealt in poisons and spells to secure affection, Sparta, the city of iron and blood, turned love into a cold, calculated military operation. Here, there was no room for softness, even on a wedding night. Marriage was not a celebration of union. It was a state duty designed solely to breed new warriors for the war machine. The ritual began with a staged kidnapping. The groom did not woo his bride, he seized her. But the true shock lies in the preparation that followed. Once captured, the bride was not adorned in fine silks or crowned with flowers. Instead, she was taken into a pitch-black room where a bridesmaid would shave her head completely bald. She was then dressed in men's clothes, rough wool tunics, and heavy leather sandals, and left alone on a single straw pallet in the dark. Historians speculate on the chilling psychology behind this. Was it to strip the woman of her identity? Or was it to ease the sexual transition for men who had spent their entire youth in all-male barracks, knowing only the company of other soldiers? To a Spartan, perhaps a wife was only acceptable if she resembled a comrade. The groom would sneak away from his military mess hall in the dead of night, sober and terrified of detection. He would slip into the room like a spy infiltrating an enemy camp. There were no vows, no lights, no tenderness. He would consummate the marriage in absolute darkness and immediately flee back to his barracks before the sun rose. This was not a single night's event. For years, a Spartan couple might live this phantom existence, having children before they ever saw each other's faces in the broad daylight. The state owned the man's days. His marriage was nothing more than a clandestine shadow, a duty performed in silence and secrecy, devoid of the intimacy that makes us human. While the rest of Greece dealt in poisons and spells to secure affection, Sparta, the city of iron and blood, turned love into a cold, calculated military operation. Here, there was no room for softness, even on a wedding night. Marriage was not a celebration of union. It was a state duty designed solely to breed new warriors for the war machine. The ritual began with a staged kidnapping. The groom did not woo his bride, he seized her. But the true shock lies in the preparation that followed. Once captured, the bride was not adorned in fine silks or crowned with flowers. Instead, she was taken into a pitch-black room where a bridesmaid would shave her head completely bald. She was then dressed in men's clothes, rough wool tunics, and heavy leather sandals, and left alone on a single straw pallet in the dark. Historians speculate on the chilling psychology behind this. Was it to strip the woman of her identity? Or was it to ease the sexual transition for men who had spent their entire youth in all-male barracks, knowing only the company of other soldiers? To a Spartan, perhaps a wife was only acceptable if she resembled a comrade. The groom would sneak away from his military mess hall in the dead of night, sober and terrified of detection. He would slip into the room like a spy infiltrating an enemy camp. There were no vows, no lights, no tenderness. He would consummate the marriage in absolute darkness and immediately flee back to his barracks before the sun rose. This was not a single night's event. For years, a Spartan couple might live this phantom existence, having children before they ever saw each other's faces in the broad daylight. The state owned the man's days. His marriage was nothing more than a clandestine shadow, a duty performed in silence and secrecy, devoid of the intimacy that makes us human. Even the simplest gestures in ancient Greece carried a heavy, often disturbing subtext. Take the apple. In our world, it is a healthy snack. In theirs, throwing an apple was a binding legal declaration of intent. To catch it was to sign a contract of submission. By accepting the fruit, a woman, or a boy, accepted the thrower's claim over them, sealing their fate with a single bite. But nowhere was this dynamic of ownership more pervasive and more unsettling to modern eyes than in the gymnasium. Here, we encounter the institution of pederasty. Often sanitized by history books as intellectual mentorship, the reality depicted in their own art is far darker. It was a formalized system of grooming. Older men, the Erasts, would stalk the wrestling grounds, watching young boys scrape oil and dust from their skin, treating them not as students, but as prized livestock. Affection was bought, not earned. The currency was not gold, but gifts of live roosters and hares, tokens that symbolized the boy's status as prey to be hunted and captured. The pottery from this era freezes these moments in time. The older man reaching out to touch the boy's chin, a gesture recognized by historians not as tenderness, but as absolute dominance. The boy stands passive, eyes downcast, accepting his role as an object to be admired. But this love had a cruel expiration date. It was conditional on youth. As soon as the first rough stubble of a beard appeared on the boy's chin, his value plummeted to zero. He was discarded, replaced by a younger, fresher face, leaving him to stand alone in the shadows of the colonnade while the cycle repeated with someone else. It was a system that taught generation after generation that love was temporary, transactional, and ultimately disposable. Today, the great temples of Athens and Corinth stand as silent, bleaching skeletons against the twilight sky. The deafening noise of the festivals, the frantic scratching of lead-cursed tablets, and the muffled cries of the Spartan brides, all have been swallowed by the relentless wind. When we walk through these ruins now, admiring the white columns, we see only the majesty of the architecture. We conveniently forget the terrifying human cost that was paid to build it. Nature has slowly, mercilessly reclaimed these spaces. Wild olive trees twist through the cracked marble floors where sacred slaves once danced in golden chains. The rain dissolves the sharp edges of the statues, smoothing away the faces of gods and mortals alike. The lead tablets lie buried deep underground, their malice strangled by tree roots, their dark magic finally neutralized by the earth. The stories we have uncovered, of binding spells, lethal potions, and stolen lives, are the ghosts that history tried to exorcise. The victors wrote the epic poems. They carved the perfect statues to immortalize their power. But the victims? The women locked in pitch-black rooms, the boys discarded in empty gymnasiums, and the lovers poisoned in the name of passion? They left no monuments. Their legacy is found only in the broken shards of pottery and the silent dust of the grave. As the sun sets over the wine-dark Aegean Sea, just as it did thousands of years ago, we are left with a haunting realization. The ancient Greeks gave us democracy, logic, and art, but they also left us a warning written in blood. They showed us that without empathy, love becomes nothing more than another form of tyranny. The flame of their civilization has long since flickered out, leaving us in the dark to wonder how many other voices have been silenced by the passage of time. As the final candle burns down and the smoke clears, we leave the ancient world behind. But the echoes of the past never truly vanish. From the lead tablets buried in the earth to the silent ruins of the Parthenon, these stories remind us that history is not just about white marble statues and epic wars. It is about human lives, human pain, and the desperate, often terrifying lengths people went to for love and control. We hope this journey has opened your eyes to a side of antiquity that textbooks often ignore. But the labyrinth of history is deep, and there are countless more mysteries waiting in the dark corners of time. If you have the courage to explore them with us, do not let the trail go cold. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel and click the bell icon so you are the first to know when we uncover the next secret. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Which of these rituals shocked you the most? Was it the cold brutality of the Spartan wedding, the deadly chemistry of the poisons, or the tragic silence of the gymnasium? Your thoughts help us decide where to travel next. Thank you for watching, for witnessing the truth, and for remembering those who were forgotten. Until we meet again in the shadows, farewell.